also known as Sigmarines, Ground Marines, and about 1,000 other variations of that, all pointing out that this was GW putting Space Marines into a fantasy setting.
Fantasy setting usually rocks. They're the blue boys. Are they Ultramarines, guys?
Yeah, that's what they are.
Are they the Ultramarines of the fantasy setting?
Even when they aren't here, the Ultramarines truly are the greatest of them all.
I knew it! I do like the Age of Sigmar and fantasy way better, I'll be honest, but only because of dragons.
Let's jump right into it, shall we?
Shall we?
Morning guys, gremlins and bokathedragon avoiding me because of work, boo.
I just woke up! Shut up, Lachlan. Shut up.
If just woke up, why start stream and not check Discord first?
Because I'm late. Also, I did check Discord on my way back home because I had to go pick up my check. Guess that checks out. I'm gonna fight you, Salt. I'm gonna fight all of you. You all deserve to be fought.
Lizard.
Hi, Unknown. Unknown? You're one of the reasons I'm thinking about making those like 5,000 points each. Want you to know that. Want you to know that. It's fine. I got 15K. Okay, I'll make them each 15K. Got it. I'm fully awake now. Let me look at these react. You underestimate my stubbornness? Maybe I do. Maybe I do. Maybe you'll prove me wrong. Look at some very cute. Go. Yeah, today is React Sunday. Thank you, cute React Dragon. Oh my god.
Volatile reputation is this one. Born from the corpse
Sigmar!
of fantasy after GW took it behind the shed, this game's never been able to fully escape from the end times and the garbage reputation that naturally gave it. The fact the first edition was kinda crap from my understanding didn't help much either. Which is a shame, because it's a fun game with a fun setting that's only been growing since its inception. Ever since 2015, Age of Sigmar has gone from the surprised adopted child no one else in the family liked to a bearer of the name Warhammer that has earned it. Once you get past Age of Sigmar and fantasy fans being at each other's throats, you find realms of endless wonder, terror, and some of the best damn models GW has ever produced. The factions in this setting are hugely varied, yes with the classic elves, dwarves, and orcs, but portraying them in ways unlike anyone else. So how about we talk about them? From the grandest of alliances to the...
I don't know if you're portraying orcs differently. At least, okay. The whole they can make anything happen, that's unique. And the spores thing's kind of unique. But everything else seems the same.
Weird fish people that like to steal your souls, let's go over the factions that exist in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. As with anything, some of them are masterfully done, and even people outside of AOS's fanbase love them. Others are the Fire Slayers. But all of them are worth talking about. So today, come with me on a journey across the mortal realms on this overview of all the armies in Age of Sigmar you can use to... But before we begin, would you like to know where to get some quad for the holiday season? If so, I've got just the thing for you, because this message is sponsored by Raycon. Regular earbuds sit in your ears and totally block out all sound, but Raycon's essential open earbuds sit right outside your ear canal, which means that while you get the clearest audio quality you can ask for, you can still hear the world around you just fine. They're light and the earhook rotates, so there's no problem keeping them in, meaning you can take them wherever you want. Go to the gym, for a walk, to the store. Wherever you go, these bad boys will be just fine.
I think it's funny that Raycon is... Look at that wagon! Oh, hi, Leg. Hi, Frankie. It's funny how, Raycon and all these other, like, wireless headphones are slowly going back to the wired. Let's be honest here, wired was the best.
Fine. With over 3 million customers, Raycon clearly has a satisfied audience, and at half the price you get sound quality just as good as other brands. It's a steal for what you're getting. Ever since getting them, these are my go-to headphones when I'm doing some writing. If a package comes by or my dog starts barking, I'll know, and the whole time I'm getting some premium grade audio. The essential open earbuds are here for the holiday season and they're selling fast.
Doing reacts, Lag! Hi!
Raycon audio products are up to 20% off this holiday season. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/Pancreasnowork to save on Raycon audio products site-wide. Order by December 15th to guarantee delivery by Christmas, because great gifts shouldn't show up late. To get
You know what? I'm gonna do this. You guys asked for it.
Age of
Twitch. Put a dashboard. I don't want to turn that off. Let's do this. So there we go. Okay. Start the recording over again. It's a
Sigmar.
Let's go!
If ever is there been a game with as volatile a reputation as this one. Born from the corpse of fantasy after GW took it behind the shed, this game's never been able to fully escape from the end times and the garbage reputation that naturally gave it. The fact the first edition was kinda crap from my understanding didn't help much either. Which is a shame, because it's a fun game with a fun setting that's only
Ooh. What is that, like a lion with wings?
been growing since its inception. Ever since
Hi.
2015, Age of Sigmar has gone from the surprised adopted child no one else in the family liked to a bearer of the name Warhammer that has earned it. Once you get past Age of Sigmar and fantasy fans being at each other's throats, you find realms of endless wonder, terror, and some of the best damn models GW has ever produced. The factions in this setting are hugely varied, yes, with the classic elves, dwarves, and orcs, but portraying them in ways unlike anyone else. So how about we talk about
Because if you just look at the orc based off this, it's the same as every other orc. Differences being they got that whole collective belief system that makes things real, and the thing that they're from spores. I think everything else though is kind of just brutal orc.
From the grandest of alliances to the weird fish people that like to steal your souls, let's go over the factions that exist in Warhammer Age of Sigmar.
I do
As
like
with anything, some of
I do like the Age of Sigmar and fantasy way better. I'll be honest. But only because of dragons.
them are masterfully done, and even people outside of AOS's fanbase love them. Others are the Fire Slayers. But all of them are worth talking about, so today, come with me on a journey across the mortal realms on this overview of all the armies in Age of Sigmar you can use to beat people over the head with. But before we begin, would you like to know where to get some quality audio just in time for the holiday season? If so, I've got just the thing for you, because this message is sponsored by Raycon.
It's
Regular earbuds
sponsored by
sit in your ears
Raycon.
and totally block out all
You know what's funny? One of my favorite manga right now does that. The orcs in that setting are battle masters and spiritual masters. It's so different that it makes me so happy.
Now then, time to jump
But some of the best gifts might arrive late. Chocolate.
through a realm gate and murder whatever's on the other side of it. The short of Age of Sigmar's history can be summed up as everyone going, world blew up, now what, and going from there. As the setting progressed, all of the factions eventually grouped together into the grand alliances you can find in the setting, and indeed how the armies are grouped on the web store. For reference, it's kind of like World of Warcraft if you're one of those poor souls who's poured thousands of hours into that game, although in AOS's case, there's 4 alliances instead of 2. Membership in a grand alliance isn't really a thing, and oftentimes the people in one hate each other as much as they hate the people out of one, but based on the themes of certain armies, you can end up grouping them into one of these 4 alliances. The opening history of the setting can largely be told through the lens of the first one we'll talk about, so let's jump right into it, shall we?
Shall we?
AKA the good guys, and this time I can say that with slightly more confidence than one usually can when you mention someone being the good guy in Warhammer. Grand Alliance Order can almost entirely be said to come about as a result of Sigmar himself, the big god from fantasy who's now been promoted to being the dude who gave the setting its name. After the end times, Sigmar floated through nothingness for God only knows how long on the core of the Warhammer fantasy world. Eventually, a magical dragon called Dracothian found him, and using the winds of magic that used to exist in fantasy, the dragon created the 8 mortal realms as they're now known, one for each wind of magic. Sigmar started wandering around this new reality, beating things over the head and trying to restart civilization. As he did so, he found a bunch of other goobers who survived Warhammer Fantasy's destruction and convinced him to join him in his quest. Some of them, like the dwarf gods, didn't need too much convincing to rebuild civilization. They were down from the start. Others, like the god of the greenskins, Gorka Morka, had to be convinced via hammer wax to the skull for a week straight. But he was successful, and eventually he managed to form a pantheon of gods from the survivors of his old home. Things were good for a while. Order prospered, and while there were the occasional threats from goblin or Skaven invasions, overall it was great. Then the Pantheon started infighting, chaos invaded, and eventually everything fell apart and Sigmar had to give up and go back home to the realm he was the specific god of, Azir. He worked on making super soldiers for a while, eventually threw open the gates of Azir and started taking names once again, and after enough time, some of his old Pantheon decided to work together once more, albeit not nearly to the level they once did. Grand Alliance Order now stands against the various factions that would see civil.
That's kind of surprising to hear that he got the orc gods to work together. Wasn't their whole thing just fighting each other?
civilization brought low, people that would either twist it into a parody of itself or completely erase it altogether. There have been ups and downs in their fighting to reclaim reality in the name of all that's good, but they all stand ready to face whatever threats come their way. And as a quick summary, that's largely the history of Grand Alliance Order you need. Well, this is the good guy faction, and only
Your hammer broke, girl.
truly applies to about 2/3 of the factions within it, if we're being generous. Some of them are pretty evil and led by evil gods, and others are happy to work for anyone to get what they want, including chaos. But while there is some nuance to it, they are still the best of a bad bunch by far. Even the most evil of them would still like to rule over a civilization. They all want to build up cities and empires and things that, while potentially evil, are better than endless undeath, endless destruction, or the endless machinations of the Chaos Gods. Order factions might stab you, but most of the time they'll also be willing to patch up your wounds, if only so you can serve them later on. As for the armies within it, let's look at the poster boys first, shall we? Also known as Sigmarines, Ground Marines, and about 1,000 other variations of that, all pointing out that this was GW putting Space Marines into a fantasy setting. And to get
Fantasy setting usually rocks.
the dismissive part of me out of the way first, yeah, that's what they are. All other things aside, looking at their models you can clearly see what GW wanted out of them. Large and in-charge figures above the common man with lots of smooth, flat surfaces that a new painter can easily get to grips with. But that isn't all that they are. When Sigmar first was in the mortal realms, he stuck with normal old people as his armies. After all, while the previous world blew up, normal people were able to hold the line for about 2,000 years, and that's only including the time he specifically was either in charge or a god. That's a decent record, so we gave him another go. Unfortunately, while normal people did
He's gonna explain why there's just a brick on screen, right?
hold the line for a while again, they once again weren't able to stop chaos from invading and causing problems across everywhere. So he went back home to Azir, and with some help from the dwarf god Grungni, got to work. Across the mortal realms, he looked for those who were above and beyond what you could expect of anyone. Notably, he didn't do this by looking for level 20 D&D adventurers, though. This wasn't the Space Marine Trials, where the strongest or otherwise bestest guy gets to be jammed full of gene seed. Sigmar looked for men, women, and potentially even non-humans from any standing who were being heroes. If you were a doctor who spent 23 out of 24 hours a day patching up soldiers to help fight chaos and then died fighting chaos warriors with a chandelier, Sigmar would grab your soul at either the moment of your death or right before and spirit you to Azir. He wasn't looking for soldiers, because you can train anyone well enough to know how to fight. He was looking for people whose spirits, not bodies, put them above the rest. He'd give you a bit of his own godly essence, equip you with the finest of armor forged from the core of a dead world, and prepare you for a fight against the people that already caused at least one apocalypse. He did this for a few centuries before he couldn't wait any longer, and then he sent forth the Stormcast Eternals. In massive bolts of lightning, entire armies of Stormcast dropped down onto the mortal realms, because if you're gonna be fighting literal demons, you might as well look like a power metal album cover at all.
I was gonna say, they basically are power metal. Especially this scene right here. What the hell? Bruh!
Times. Across 8 realities, Sigmar's forces waged war, supercharged men and women tearing into chaos wherever they went and reclaiming reality for the good people who either once did or still live there. After reclaiming Sigmar's very own hammer, Galmaraz, it was gifted to the Celestin Prime, aka Stormcast Primarch, aka Karl Franz Reborn, and his fighting forces were at the top of their game and reclaiming more and more land every day. Eventually, their blitz came to a halt, but they had laid the groundwork for order to once again flourish in at least select areas of the mortal realms. Stormcast Eternals are very much like Space Marines at their core, but according to former GW author Josh Reynolds, saying they're identical is like saying that because Batman and Captain America are both superheroes, they're the same thing entirely. Stormcast Eternals are closer to demigod knights. They're undoubtedly stronger and overall greater than the average person, at least in terms of what they can do, but
Basically, they're the Captain America. Batman is the other side. Just evil Batman, kind of. But this side is basically Captain America.
that doesn't mean they necessarily lord it over the average man. Like Spider-Man says after watching Uncle Ben get murked for the 1000th time, with great power comes great responsibility, and the Stormcast are determined to use their gifts to enact Sigmar's will. When they aren't fighting, they're oftentimes local rulers, administrators, hell, there might even be a few Stormcast taxmen out there. I'd imagine they'd be quite good at convincing people to pay up. They're above the common man, but unlike Space Marines, they aren't separate from them. And Sigmar, by all accounts, does seem to want to do the best he can for the mortal realms. He doesn't always succeed, and by the nature of Warhammer, sometimes he oversteps his bounds or does a bit of a morally great goof. But he tries his best to save everyone, and the Stormcast are a reflection of that. They come in swinging to save the day against all the odds, and oftentimes they manage to do just that. Stormcast are also some...
They're the blue boys. Are they Ultramarines, guys? Are they the Ultramarines of the fantasy setting?
Something that I think has been long overdue in all of Warhammer. A good guy faction that can properly respawn. When a Stormcast dies, their soul is spirited back to Azir to be reforged and sent back out there. The process isn't perfect, as 4th edition has made ever more clear. As you get reforged more and more, you eventually lose your personality and become little more than a raging ball of magical Azir energy that barely remembers what they're even fighting for. But though the process does eventually become horrific, the Stormcast are a way for the good guys to stay in the fight almost as permanently as the forces of chaos, who themselves have never really been reliably killable since their inception. Plus, the first death ain't so bad. You might get some short-term memory loss and a raging grudge against whoever killed you, but I'd say that's worth it to be able to hunt down whatever killed you and turn their skull into a drinking cup. Again, much like the Marines, you can find various different chapters, or storm hosts rather, to paint your army as and enjoy their distinct flavor of Sigmarine. The Hammers of Sigmar are the poster boys, the ones with all the attention and the boxes that wear blue and gold and are the standard for the army. Even when they aren't here, the Ultramarines truly are the greatest of them all.
I knew it!
The Anvils of the Heldenhammer, meanwhile, are a gloomy bunch of folk who were forged from long-dead heroes rather than recently dead or about to die ones. They even worship another god than Sigmar, Morda, who's heavily implied to be more from Warhammer Fantasy reincarnated. Much like the Marines, you can find any theme to paint, and if you don't like the ones on display by GW, you have free reign to make your own. The setting is quite homebrew friendly for those of you who want a chance to get a bit creative. While they aren't perfect, the Knights Excelsior's habit of massacring everyone who isn't 110% Team Sigmar shows this. The Stormcast by and large are what GW seems to want modern-day Space Marines to be. Heroes with bits of moral ambiguity about them and plenty of trauma, but ones that are ultimately fundamentally heroic in nature. They stand tall against the darkness, be that chaos or even their supposed allies, all in the name of keeping the lights on just a little bit longer. If you want heroes that find...
Is that a Drake Hound? I'm telling you, I love the fantasy and the Sigmars so much.
Finally have the same staying power as all the other bad guys without resorting to plot armor to explain how Marnia's Calgar is somehow still alive, the Stormcast are perfect for you. The Stormcast standing tall above the average man wouldn't mean much without being able to see the average man to compare them to, though, which brings us...
Those are Drake Hounds. Those aren't dragons. They'd need wings and opposable thumbs.
to... Here's where you can make your home, fans of the Imperial Guard or the Empire of Man.
Oh, they have proper dragons too?
The collective name for all the various cities of mortals that have cropped up across the mortal realms in the wake of the Stormcast lightning strikes across the realities. Nominally aligned, and they at least usually don't go to war with each other, they're in reality entirely different cultures and political entities that mostly do their own thing. Plenty of interactions between the cities occurs, but in a given moment there's no one standardized government they all pay fealty to. Aside from whichever god may happen to be visiting one on a given day, of course, since in Age of Sigmar that can just happen. The cities tend to be centered around realm gates, the method by which travel can be done between realms. Not only does this make them major hubs of trade, it allows for order to more easily go to and from warzone to warzone. In worst case scenarios, it also gives an easy point of retreat into if Khorne starts bulldozing through your house. The cities of Sigmar to me can be separated
Ooh, he's a fancy man. I like the fancy man.
Out. In universe, they used to act in much the same
So are they like the Conquistadors? Conquistadors?
same way the Imperial Army did for the Space Marines during the Great Crusade. The forces of the cities were the auxiliaries to the superhuman
Vampire Hunters. Gotta have them.
And they would follow along and garrison reconquered areas, helping respread civilization to lands retaken from chaos. In real life during this time, they were both a collection of
The Mega Lion Mount, of course,
of old Warhammer fantasy models jammed into one army. Empire, High Elves, Dark Elves, Dwarves.
I think I believe so, Brennan. It is kind of just a spin-off of the Warhammer, but with 40k style, with D&D style.
Push back the darkness and carve themselves a home in this new world. As time went on in universe, the cities of Sigmar began heading more of their own actions, and the Stormcast oftentimes became force multipliers in their crusades, much like the Guard and Space Marines relationship often is in modern 40k. The Dawnbringer Crusade and the actions undertaken by it were spearheaded by the cities themselves, and the Stormcast, now that their literal lightning strikes have been significantly slowed down, fight alongside these mortals as often as not. And in real life, the cities of Sigmar have over...
They have little city models? That's crazy. I like the models, they're cute.
time gotten plenty of unique models all to themselves that weren't just old fantasy models GW still wanted to profit off of because they had too many spares lying around. Describing all the cities in broad strokes beyond that is something I do have a bit of trouble doing, because as I said, they're all distinct entities beyond the models. Greywater Fastness is a city in the realm of life that paradoxically is a highly industrialized arms center, which naturally causes tensions between them, Sigmar, and the people in the nature realm that don't much like pollution and gunpowder smoke. Anvilgard is, or rather was in some ways, a gloomy city shrouded in smoke and darkness on account of the massive amount of pesticides covering the landscape, and no, I didn't make that up. It doesn't actually hurt anything beyond the plants they're designed to hold back, but the intense gloom this causes means that this city, among other reasons, has become a medieval/fantasy version of Night City. Now, in Age of Sigmar, you probably won't be chroming up as much as David, but a choom can still find themselves some eddies if they're willing to do some dirty work. There's a city for any theme you can think of, since AOS, as I said, is quite friendly to those who want to create a unique army. The Mortal Realms are said to be nearly limitless as well, so again, just make up your own city if you don't like what's available. That applies to basically every army, so I'll stop saying it going forward. The cities of Sigmar lore-wise are the normal dudes who hold the line against terrors beyond their comprehension, because normal folk in Warhammer can stand against demons quite alright. Model-wise, however, I have to confess I'm not the biggest fan. Not because they're bad models.
He's riding a manticore. Or is she? She's riding a manticore? That's pretty cool.
These guys are
That's
great.
pretty cool.
The new models the army has are a bit too detailed for what's supposed to be the average Joes and Janes of the setting. There's a lot going on here, and to me it's a bit too much for what's supposed to be just average people. But at the same time, part of Warhammer's fun is how balls to the wall it is, and the cities of Sigmar certainly don't have bad-looking models. So if you want to hold the line with a wall of guns and artillery backed up by people with shields and hammers that really aren't suited to what they're fighting, the cities of Sigmar provide here as the Guard and Empire do elsewhere. Also, almost the entire Dark Elf range from Warhammer Fantasy is still here, so if you hate Age of Sigmar and can stomach being a Legends army in Old World, you still have reason to visit the Age of Sigmar web store. Elves. I love them. The fantasy side of Warhammer seems to love them too. The 40k side seems to absolutely hate elves. But Age of Sigmar falls under that first category, so before anything else, my first recommendation is that if you're an Eldar fan but wish the authors didn't hold you in contempt, then come on over here. The Lumineth and the elves in Age of Sigmar have a neat history. Initially, the surviving elves who became gods, Tyrion, Teclis, Malekith, and Arathi, started helping out civilization as Sigmar was. They noticed there weren't nearly as many elves as there were human or dwarfs in the mortal realms, however. So with Marathi's guidance, they follow a trail leading them to none other than Slaanesh herself, who still has most of the elf souls inside of her. Because Slaanesh had a full tummy from digesting too many elves at once, she was basically just sitting in a cave waiting for either all those souls to be processed or history's worst case of the hangover shits ever seen. Also, if you take a look at this official piece of Warhammer artwork, you will notice that Slaanesh is uncircumcised. I hope you enjoy this cursed knowledge as much as I do.
I didn't need to know that. Didn't need to know that.
Which is not at all. After divvying up the elf souls, Tyrion and Teclis got to work with their share and eventually created the Lumineth Realm Lords based on the High Elves of old, including, in at least one case, the soul of a former High Elf who's now Alphonse from Fullmetal Alchemist. Things were great for a while until Chaos showed up, in this case due to the Lumineth kind of reacting the fall of the Eldar. There was less hedonism and more magical WMDs in this case though, and they named it the Spirefall. It looked like the end until Teclis spoke to the Spirit of the Moon and came back to reorganize their entire society based on its wisdom. Now the Lumineth are a staunchly disciplined society seeking to spread their endless wisdom across the mortal realms, and at least half the time they actually actually ask others if they'd like to receive the wisdom first. The other half the time, you will be receiving their wisdom, and if you disagree, these nice elves over here will take you into this unmarked building to politely explain why you really should just listen to them. The Lumineth are the high elves of the setting, although certainly differently
We've watched that, Joshua.
than aesthetics to the old ones. Whereas the high elves in fantasy were ancient Greek, the Lumineth are very ancient Greek. I know a hoplite when I see one, and these are clearly
Those are definitely hoplite. Yeah, I would agree with him. These are literally hoplites.
hoplites, even if the shield isn't as round as it should be. Of course, they also have strange elemental spirits that are equal parts familiar and spiritual companion to accompany them and guide them on whatever journey they may undertake. And going beyond even that, Big Cow is here to smash you into the
Big cow! He has mountains on his back. Hello?
ground with. The Lumineth are strange beings that many think are made of pure light at first, and their geometric magics and relationships with their realm's native spirits has given them a spice setting them apart from standard high elves. They're still viciously arrogant, and sometimes they aren't so much as freeing people as putting them under new management, but the management is nicer than chaos, and their arrogance is mostly earned. When they were introduced, they did curb stomp the entirety of Grand Alliance death. I'd have a bit of an ego too. They got some of the most active gods in the setting backing them up too. Teclis, my beloved little twink, is still around as a proper god now, and since he's a playable tabletop model, you can assume he gets around quite often even without reading his lore in AOS. He's still suffering because the life of Teclis is inherently suffering, but now he's a god while doing it. Although his followers will oftentimes politely request to speak to his moon spirit friend because they'd rather hear the wisdom from the source than through Teclis. The poor guy's a god and he still doesn't get the respect he deserves, he just can't catch a break. Tyrion, meanwhile, is a blind god that sees through Teclis' eyes now and has been supposedly fighting against Malekith as he did in Old Fantasy, although as of writing this, we've received basically nothing else on him. The Lumineth formed their societies and kingdoms into Tyrionic and Teclian nations based on which of the brothers they more emulate, though of course all cities revere both of them. The Lumineth fight hard and study aplenty with the same arrogance elves always bring to the table, but they've again largely earned it on account of averting their own total destruction and being so good at countering chaos and death. If you want elves, you can do no better than them, because their models are all new, they're bringing back some heavy hitter characters from fantasy, and even 2,000 years onward, everyone still loves a good phalanx.
Good phalanx is pretty good.
Fun fact, they all do crack. There's a substance
I want to say he's lying, but from what Warhammer has taught me, is he might not be lying.
it's called Aether Quartz that heightens their senses vastly. When it wears off,
He might not be lying, guys. He might not be lying.
it drains them of emotions, leaving them a bit dull to the world. Since these elves come from the land of logic and reason, some of them view this as a positive outcome since it strips away those troublesome emotions and whatnot. Others just still use it like crack, though. So not only is it possible for you to get jumped by an army of crackheads in Age of Sigmar, it's downright common depending on who you're fighting.
Look, guys, it's Kane.
I did tell a slight fib earlier. Morathi early on wasn't a god unlike her son and step-great-grandsons. She naturally wasn't happy with this, so when everyone was dividing up the portion of elf souls they got, Morathi messed with the process to get a few more than she deserved. This weekend the Biding's holding Slaanesh, but Morathi is a prick, so this didn't mean much to her. Although in saying that, she has a few times mentioned worrying about Slaanesh escaping, which makes me wonder if she's gone insane in some part, or is just fundamentally incapable of recognizing anything she does is actually a bad thing. Probably both. Morathi also found something from the old world to help her become a goddess, the Heart of Cain, the elven god of war. She set up a religion around it based in many ways upon the Dark Elves' old Witch Elves, and with enough worship and sacrifices given to the heart, it said that Cain would be reborn. This is entirely true, but she was the whole time siphoning the worship and sacrifices to Cain to herself. Slowly she gained more power, and eventually with a dramatic ritual and journey into Slaanesh, she achieved apotheosis and ascended to true godhood. This has caused a bit of a schism in their society between those who happily worship Morathi as Cain reborn, and those who are upset they got scammed by a lady with a history of being far closer to her son than a mother ever should be, but she doesn't care for the opinions of those below her. The Daughters of Cain are the most outright evil of the
that's valid.
factions. Even ignoring Morathi and her antics, they are fervent worshippers of the elf god of murder. That's their baseline. They're not gonna be nice. The best case
When were they ever nice?
scenario is that they focus all that murder worship against the forces of
Yes, let's kill each other. That's how we make our society prosper.
chaos, destruction, or death, but that's of course not always the case. Morathi sniped the city of Anvilgard out from under Sigmar's nose when she ascended. The DOK are more than happy to fight their supposed allies. They have few, if any, true friends, and are largely tolerated instead of appreciated. In day-to-day life, they're, again, very murdery. The Daughters of Cain aren't named as such just because it sounds cool. They're a highly matriarchal society, to the point that Morathi had a spell cast that siphons a bit of the soul out of every male elf into her magical cauldron. They do have some more beyond being the land of femdom enjoyers, however. Chiefly, they're snake ladies. Those snake ladies came about from the fact that some elves were a bit too corrupted by their time in Slaaneish's gut, and so they've turned into gorgons. These beings are kept under a heavy magical glamour to make any non-Cainite allies see them as normal elves, albeit probably much taller than normal ones. Until her ascension, Morathi had to spend her time pretending that Cain was who they really were worshipping rather than her by technicality, and she would have a habit of sending those who got too close to the truth out on suicide missions. By contrast, her ascension means that she can be open about it, but now religious strife is much more common. The Daughters of Cain do in fact worship a god, and because her magic was partially centered on Cain's heart, she can be argued to be Cain reborn, but they do not worship Kayla Mencha Cain as he was and as they thought they did. The fact I focus so much on Morathi in these armies section isn't only because I'm a hack who would bend
He's down bad. That's why.
over backwards for Morathi in every way you can mean with that
See?
saying. It's because she's turned herself into the cult of personality and driving force behind this faction. Without her, I don't think it's a mistake to say there would be no Daughters of Cain. In short, if you like the idea of hot naked elf ladies, with some hot naked men as auxiliaries, butchering their enemies, or if you're down for a society layered in religious intrigue and strife, the Daughters of Cain are perfect for you. Or if you're a prick who thinks everyone else exists to serve you, they're also the perfect army for that kind of person.
Shame!
Morathi is still the worst, and even without her, these elves think stabbing someone on the throat in the street is a great way to give praise to their god.
Wow.
Another lie from earlier, this time one by omission, was that the Lumineth were not the first attempt at recreating the High Elves. There were a few different tries, and Teclis on one of his earlier attempts created some elves that were off. They were resentful, withdrawn, and traumatized. Obviously this was from their time stuck in Slaanesh, but Teclis wanted to find out the specifics and if there was any underlying corruption. Problem is, when he took away Ideneth to figure it out, it tended to leave them outright insane. Understandably fearing for their lives and sanity, these elves who had become the Ideneth Deepkin took a magical lantern from Teclis and fled into the perfect place to remain completely hidden, the very seas themselves. Teclis initially wanted to exterminate them, both for their inherent wrongness and probably because he was upset they stole his stuff, but Tyrion managed to talk him out of it. This meant nothing for the Ideneth, however. Calling out to the god of Mithlan, as many of these elves were actually sheltered by him in old fantasy before the world's destruction, they received only silence because he was dead. The other gods they reached out to were either also dead, couldn't hear them, or for one reason or another ignored them, and so they tried to recreate Mithlan and form society without divine guidance all on their own. Eventually, they recognized that though Teclis was a bastard to them, he likely had a point about them being potentially corrupted. So they looked over themselves and found not one, but two curses plaguing them. The first is an occasional turbo madness that makes them fly into a frenzy,
Okay, so they had turbo madness.
killing everything around them. This is actually quite rare, thankfully, though for obvious reasons is problematic when it happens. The second problem is one that spells disaster for them existing for longer than a single generation. Only 1 in 100 Ideneth, or 1 in 10 depending on when the lore you read is from, actually survive past infancy. The reason for this is that their souls wither away almost immediately, as if their souls were aging a rate 1,000 times faster than their bodies were. They tried to solve it and indeed still do, but in the meantime eventually discovered a horrific way to stave off the problem, stealing the souls of others to keep theirs healthy. They did try this on animals at first, but that only gave them a few days. Sapient beings, however, gave them decades of soul and allowed them to actually live lives, and so the item that took to raiding coastlines to stave off extinction. Eventually this turned into them doing it whenever they needed to expand, and while they try to focus on the bad eggs of the mortal realms to soul suck, many of them view the other races as nothing more than food for their expansion. For a while they were a secret faction, with only a few people having any faint idea that they existed. Sigmar knew was something dangerous underwater, but didn't have the time to look for it, and Nagash as well knew that someone was stealing the souls that were rightfully his to steal. Helping this is that the Ideneth have their own sort of magical glamour they can use that at least partially erases the memories of whoever they raid, hiding their actions for centuries. That, and they rarely left anyone behind after a raid, with the few survivors that did exist either considered too traumatized to give reliable information, or madmen to disregard entirely. Eventually, during one raid, Alariel found out, since by virtue of being a goddess, she's immune to their memory shenanigans, and from there on out, everyone else slowly but surely learned of their existence. When Chaos came, they tentatively allied with the rest of Order, but similar to the Daughters of Cain, no one truly trusts them, even if they only raid because they have to. The Endeneth have adapted to living underwater entirely, and are masters of remaining hidden, at least on.
Kind of surprised that they don't have like gills or anything. But I guess because they're... Is it because they have like elven like resilience or something? They don't really need to... Maybe it's like underwater caves or something?
On the large scale, telling your average
Magic?
cities of
Okay,
Sigmar
yeah.
want to go invade underwater isn't going to work for them any better than it did Caligula. Their society has 3 tiers in it. The Namarti are those vast majority of Ideneth with leaky souls that need topping off. They make up the various battle line foot soldiers of the Ideneth and are born eyeless, with the book briefly retconning them into having their eyes ritualistically cut out of them before it was itself retconned, and now they're born eyeless again. The Achelians are those that are essentially normal elves, albeit ones that live underwater. They're the warrior caste and general leaders of society, dictating policy and ruling over the Namarti. And then there's the Isharan, the priests and mages of Ideneth society. Ideneth still being elves, naturally the wizards get their own caste. Technically, there is a 4th caste, the Sithai, that consists of the original Ideneth made by Teclis, but there's only one of them left, so it doesn't really count. The Ideneth are certainly closer to the bad guy end of things than not, but this time it isn't their fault. They aren't the Dark Eldar for the most part, as all of the most brutal and bloodthirsty of their enclaves either regret having to take the lives of others, or at the very least aren't happy with having to do so. Their souls just wither away if they don't, however, and while it's easy to just say, live with it, I imagine it's another thing entirely when it's your soul that's draining away like a leaky faucet.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess they're like a morally gray, but more on the good side. Like they only really raid because they'd like cease to exist otherwise.
The Dark Eldar could prevent their soul drain through alternative methods. They just like being assholes on top of everything. The Ideneth can't. Even the bloodthirsty ones seek a cure to their affliction, because at the end of the day, not having your soul drain out at all is ideal. Beyond
I would feel like if they could choose a different path, they would.
On that nuance, though, they're one of the most unique armies GW has ever produced. Even die-hard fantasy old heads usually grudgingly admit that the Ideneth Deepkin models are spectacular, because the ocean as a theme is something criminally underrepresented, especially in tabletop gaming. When they go to war, a magical occurrence called the Eversea follows them, which means that their eel and shark mounts can fly through the air as if they were underwater. Coral reefs, shipwrecks, and more randomly appear around them, and even though you can still breathe, whenever you exhale, bubbles come out as if you were underwater. That's really cool, if you'll pardon that advanced technical language. If you're interested...
That is pretty cool. I like that. That's like a neat, that's a neat, like, what would you call it? Like, occurrence that happen whenever they go off.
Arguably the best depiction Warhammer's ever had of the ends actually justifying the means, or you're just Jotaro Kujo and love marine biology, this army is for you.
Jotaro!
Big turtle. The only problem with this model is that there isn't a big octopus or something to go along with him. Praise be to Big Turtle.
Praise be to Big Turtle.
Alariel the Everqueen, one of the 2 leaders of the High Elves, avatar of Isha, and eventually life magic itself, and an all-around My Little Pony character put through the filter of Warhammer.
I'm guessing I would like them then.
She woke up all alone in the Age of Sigmar, having been put through the ringer to say the least. Her boyfriend was gone, and for all she knew, dead, and all she had for company were soul pods from the old world. So she started planting those soul pods. While she was a lot more PTSD-ridden than before, she was still a nature elf queen who was now a full-blown goddess, so she sang to them all a song that resounded in their very souls. Reborn as nature spirits, the Sylvaneth flourished in the peaceful realm of life. Then Chaos showed up and shit, everything's on fire and disease-ridden. To make it worse, Alariel's normal elf worshippers all dipped out on her, leaving her and the tree spirits on their own. They put up a decent fight, but almost all of Nurgle's forces were devoted to her, eventually culminating in Alariel's death. As bad as that sounds, she's the goddess of nature, life and rebirth and all that crap included, so the Stormcast Eternals replanted her own soul pod in the ground and she came out almost as lively as she was in fantasy, albeit significantly angrier. She started kicking ass and taking names, pushing back Nurgle as best she could and eventually becoming a major player in the mortal realms once more. She's mostly forgiven those elves who abandoned her in the Age of Chaos, though her tree children are far more mixed on that matter. She's begun talking to and working alongside the other gods and factions. The Sylvaneth revere her as their mother goddess, and while she is similarly a massive fixture of their culture as Morathi is to the daughters of Cain, here it's much less evil. She's genuinely a guiding mother goddess who sure dictates policy, but they're all happy to let her do it, and she absolutely does have the Sylvaneth's best interest in her heart. She is the forest in most ways that matter, so even if she ever did something that appears
Basically, if Gaia was a god.
utterly selfish, by helping herself, she still helps the Sylvaneth. The Sylvaneth are far from evil, but they are in many ways an alien society. It's a bit of the Ents from Lord of the Rings mixed with the fact that I at least feel it's perfectly understandable that a tree spirit would have different priorities and mindsets to a meatbag. They're far more in tune with natural energies, which is part
Is that a model? Because that looks cool.
of why that Greywater fastness business with the cities of Sigmar pissed them off so much before Alarielle worked out a compromise. Some of them are assholes. Dryka is a pretty malevolent tree spirit from Warhammer Fantasy that Alarielle brought back as a wooden battle-mech looking monster. Even at their worst, if you leave them alone, they'll probably leave you alone. Each of them is born to fulfill a role, and they carry with them not only that same song Alarielle sang in ages past, but the memories of their entire bloodline. Tree line. Whatever Grandpa Tree
Tree line. Sap line! Oh. Sapula.
did lives on in them, however you want to word it. Even the youngest of
They're saps.
Sylvaneth is an ancient being because of this, with memories stretching back to their race's infancy. It's not all peaceful tree stuff, being a Warhammer game and all that. Dryka leads a group called the Outcasts, Sylvaneth that no one is quite sure how they
Step line, step bro.
popped
Shut
up,
up!
but everyone knows they're insane, murderous beasts. They're semi-tolerated because they're good at killing intruders, but even in the semi-hive mind of the Sylvaneth, there is discord to be found. On a meta level, it is
They do look kind of cool.
a bit of a shame that there aren't really any elves left around in what is clearly the sequel army to the Wood Elves, although they do make up for it somewhat by being tree ghosts on top of normal tree people. If you wish Treebeard was led by an angry elf queen and some of his brothers might water the roots by soaking him in the blood of their enemies though, they're the perfect army for you still.
Boobies!
I'd also recommend therapy in that case, but painting the Sylvaneth can tide you over till you get that scheduled out.
These guys! That apparently everyone hates, which makes me sad for gingers.
What if we took the Slayers from Warhammer Fantasy, gave them an incredibly interesting culture, and also made them the only thing in the army and therefore ruined what made them unique? Welcome to the Fire Slayers, the most milquetoast army ever released by GW. At least
Milk toast? What do you mean? Milk bread is only in really Japan.
terms of appearance. As I said, cool lore though. When Sigmar found those two dwarf gods, Grimnir and Grugni, they both said they'd do him a solid since he freed them from being chained to a mountain. Grugni said to take his time, slow and steady wins the race, and that Big S could call in that favor whenever. Grimnir wanted to get his debt cleared immediately, so Sigmar shrugged and pointed at a giant lava monster that he told Grimnir to then kill. Grimnir succeeded, but also died in the process, blowing up and scattering across the mortal realms. Even this early on, a lot of dwarfs, it turned out, were still big fans of Grimnir, so they started looking for the pieces of him that coalesced into what's known as Urgold. And since Grimnir was a god of war that they worshipped, they naturally decided that forming their entire society into lodges and hiring themselves off as mercenaries in exchange for gold payment was as good way to gather Grimnir bits as any. So they did just that. Thus do we get the Fire Slayers, brutal melee combatants searching all of reality to hopefully piece their god back together, one gold coin at a time. And even if they can't, they're still dwarfs. Urgold is special to them, but none of them are going to say no to regular gold either, so if it ends up being a waste of time, they still get to own their fighting skills and become filthy rich doing it. For a bit on their culture, Fire Slayers are big on having kids, meaning for perhaps the first time ever, dwarfs are not an endangered species. At least one rune father of a Fire Slayer lodge has 50 goddamn children, so across the mortal realms do these dwarf bees occasionally strike out to form a new lodge/hive and ply their trade in the dangerous lands of Age of Sigmar.
So they're wearing regular gold, right? I would assume, and then they put all the gold in one spot, maybe, and melt it down to be together.
With the finest of craftsdwarfship do these stunties equip themselves, selling themselves out to anyone, even chaos sometimes. The ends justify the means in their eyes, for their end goal is nothing less than the reconstruction of a god. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but if short, naked, hairy redheads is your thing, then you could do no better than this army. And the flavor of why they fight is admittedly some of the best ever. Like any mercenary group, who you're fighting for is secondary. The price is what makes it right. They're not my cup of tea.
No one hates them, really, that they're just a mild as a faction. Yeah, I know Urgold's the fragments and stuff, but do they collect all the Urgold in one spot and melt it down?
Truth be told, but I imagine if you like the Fire Slayers, then you'll love the Fire Slayers. It's easy to be dismissive of the angry Carrot Tops until 100 of them burst through your wall because the payment fell short.
Shut up, Archive.
Not all of the dwarfs were the Fire Slayers, though. Some of them were the standard dwarf, or if you want to suck off GW's legal department, Duarden. I'm calling them dwarfs. Anyways, some dwarfs were what you'd expect, living in mountains and mining and all that fun stuff. Then, when Chaos invaded, they retreated to their mountain homes to hopefully weather the storm, as dwarfs typically do. This almost universally did not work, and most of the survivors of these dwarfs were those that constructed massive flying fortress cities and took to the skies for survival. Powering this was another form of gold known as Aether Gold, a colorless gas that can only be detected by smell that also gives them super miner's lung in addition to standard crazed dwarf gold lust. Early on in the Kharadron's history, they were constantly beset by Chaos invaders. Between this and the fact that Aether Gold tends to attract monsters, Kharadron civilization tends to be equal parts military fleet and actual city. With the Iden and the Thiepkin, you could make Bioshock jokes because they all
Bioshock.
live in underwater cities. With the Kharadron overlords, you can make Bioshock jokes because this is a hyper-capitalist group of self-reliant
Oh. It's America.
entrepreneurs who in some ways are even more mercenary than the Fire Slayers. Also the floating cities, although you are limited to Bioshock Infinite jokes in that case. They took a long look at dwarf society, which prior to this in AOS was not far removed from fantasy's old dwarfs, and reevaluated everything to see what should stay and
Is that a sword or a blood blade? What is that?
what should go. The intense focus on craftsmanship and quality stayed, of course. These are still dwarfs. But science and technology was even more pursued, innovations ruthlessly invested in, and religion largely abandoned. Grugni seemingly abandoned them to their fates when Chaos invaded, and even though this was because he was afraid he'd smother their progress and he thought they could handle things on their own, the Kharadron naturally didn't take this too well. Technical atheism is the religion of the Kharadron, as gods are fickle beings that can abandon you on a whim. And while the Fire Slayers love profit because any gold can potentially be gold, the Kharadron take it to another level. Grudges are by and large only pursued if doing so won't cause loss in profit. Everything is weighed in terms of gains and losses. If you will lose money doing something, or at the very least it won't in the long term see a return on your investment, an action is not going to be taken. Abandoning your allies, ironically enough, is something the Kharadron situationally approve of. If they can be saved, then effort should be made to do so, but if the cause is completely hopeless, then sorry fellows, the Kharadron aren't swooping in to save the day. Even then, a lot of the time they'll only save you because a living ally is profitable. No sense letting all your trading partners die, after all. Their ruling government body, the Geldrad, is far closer to a board of directors than it is a government entity. If a dwarf can make a profit, they can rise high in Kharadron society, but if they can't, then good luck getting anywhere. All of these things are very
Good luck getting anywhere.
self-serving, but the roots of their society are a brutal battle for survival. In their nascency, there was no room for an incompetent leader to take hold and give shitty commands just because they were the kid of the last one. The Kharadron needed both a decisive action and to ensure that tradition didn't stifle them. So, the ultimate meritocracy was born. If you do well, you get to be rich, because doing well, especially in the early days, meant you prevented total destruction by the hordes of chaos. There is no nobility in the Kharadron overlords, at least not in terms of titles and land passed down through generations. There's only the ruthless free market, all sorts of fun steampunk tropes, and dwarfs whose dreams burned like a rocket inside. The Kharadron have had a rather hard time, all things considered. As the setting went on, their skyports faced disaster after disaster, with some of them being completely destroyed and just about all of them facing repeated crises between Nagash, Chaos, and the occasional band of goblins who got far luckier than they have any right to. But despite this, they persevere. They're the most technologically advanced race by far, and while not being able to use magic sucks, giant flying gun zeppelins make up for it plenty well enough. Plus, just look at this guy.
I mean, he's got a top hat made of gold. The guns are cool, though.
Is this not the most glorious thing ever? Steampunk dwarfs so committed to the bit that they have armored top hats and 19th century robber baron mustaches. Absolutely phenomenal.
Cinema.
They also live by a set of highly detailed rules dictating what's good and not, based on profit of course. And since they pilot floating armadas, and if you kill everyone who'd snitch, you can go home scot-free, them being pirates is very much an option for your own army. So if you live to make as much money as feasibly possible, love cheesing the economy and strategy games, and think that any code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules, the Keratin Overlords are perfect for you.
Pirates would love them.
Fantastical heroes are all well and good, but there's something uniquely captivating about paving over a magical forest in the name of the Industrial Revolution. The last army in Grand Alliance Order. In some ways the Seraphon, or Lizardmen as I will call them, have stayed the same since Vanity, but in others, they've evolved. After the end times, the Lizardmen that remained floated across space in their massive temple pyramid spaceships until one by one, only a few of them were left. But during this journey, they too met Dracothian, who directed them to Azir, same as Sigmar. Living above it in their ships, they resumed the sacred task they once held in Fantasy, countering the forces of chaos no matter where they appear.
Lizard people.
The biggest difference of their lore comes in the form of what exactly they are nowadays. Initially, there were like 5 of the Slann mage priests that survived into the setting. The rest of the Lizardmen were sort of lightning demons remembered into existence by the Slann. Whenever they weren't on the battlefield, they didn't really exist. Then more lore came out, and apparently there were other Lizardmen on those temple ships, and then eventually an entire separate arm of the Seraphon were revealed to live in the mortal realms as the Lizardmen of old did, coming out of spawning pools and now outright terraforming the land to resemble the jungles of Lustria. This all means that some others may have survived as well, or maybe they were initially magicked back into being by the
No, there's actual dragons. Shut up, Cat.
Slann before evolving. But either way, they aren't just the simple servants of the old ones any longer. Lightning and Azir energy flows through their very veins, and they counteract chaos far more effectively because of it. Other than that, though, they are still the same overall. In fact, the Lizardmen are perhaps the best survivors of Fantasy other than the Skaven, with just about all their models making it into AOS unscathed. Most of their new releases have been updates to the aging kits, because while the quality of the models could be improved, the concept of Aztec lizards riding dinosaurs is something that GW perfected already. Why fix what isn't broken? The majority of other changes they've received aren't actually changes, they've just been scaled up to fit into Age of Sigmar.
Okay, so they didn't really change much. They just made them bigger. Got it.
They don't just fight demons, they're inherently anathema to demons and can now see farther into the future than even Tzeentch, the god of magic and fate. They don't just follow the great plan of a mystical race called the Old Ones, they've discovered that the previous setting blowing up may damn well have been part of the great plan, and Age of Sigmar is where the real fight begins. They don't just hate the Skaven, the sight of a Lizardman will send a Skaven into ancestral nightmare flashbacks of Skaven being sacrificed in Lustria. They do have personalities now though, or at least more of a personality.
Those are big boys. Say hello to the big boys.
Lord Croak turned the stars above him into a grinning Pepe face, because when you have more power than most gods at your fingertips, you can be a shitlord all you want. No one can stop you. If you like Aztec lizards riding dinosaurs but want them on circles instead of squares, the Seraphon are for you. And with that, 1 Grand Alliance down, 3 to go. Christ.
Well, that was Pancreasnowork. We'll watch more of that later. Give him a like and a follow if you like him. Give me a like and a follow. Not that I care or anything. Smoke boom.